In a world ruled by Dr. Davis, two men hash it out over chess for the sake of having a project plot line. Observe as the fourth wall is broken and men humiliate themselves on behalf of their GPAs. This is ultimate chess manufacturing.
ABS, because that's what's loaded.
So with the Y axis and the Z axis being different, is this going to come around or is it going to come up?
I'm about to make sure.
Okay.
Does it look right?
So put Y 20 with that, make it round?
Yeah, we'll do that. You know what? So you mess up, you can always delete. Open the same file again.
Same thing with video, so power editing, we didn't make that mistake.
Yep. Here we go, we're starting. We're going to scale it because it comes in millimeters, regardless of your units. I'm going to turn on uniform scale. Yes, no, not really on. Turn that on. Enter. Scales it up to uniform. And then I'm going to reduce this. Well, I just press harder.
Sometime. So now we leave this in the whole time doing it, or is it our time?
No, it's down there. It's on the corner.
Okay. So I just let that pause. We're going to create minions to go forth and do our bidding. Yeah. But no, I mean, it's just cool. We're machining this. We're cutting down on lathe. On lathe. Actually, no, epoxy. Well, we'll see if we do it on the middle, not on epoxy.
It's medium.
To make the knight pieces, we used a stereolithography printer called the Formlabs 3 that we had access to in the fabrication lab. The first step was to create a CAD file, which we did using AutoCAD. Then, we exported the file from AutoCAD as an STL file and uploaded it into a program called Preform. In Preform, we made sure that the size and orientation of the knight pieces was correct, auto-uploaded supports, and sent the order to the Formlabs 3 to start printing. The printer lowered its building platform into a vat of liquid of Formlabs clear resin, and began using UV lights to cure the resin that was in contact with the building platform, as to solidify the piece layer by layer upon it. Once the piece was complete, a few hours later, we moved it into the curing tank for 30 minutes to ensure that all liquid left on the pieces was completely cured, as it's harmful to human skin uncured. Then, we removed it from the building platform and left it in the drying tank for 20 minutes. This was the only safety measure taken for the printing portion. Finally, we finished up the pieces with some finishing touches, including clipping off supports and sanding the pieces, making sure to tie up loose hair and clothing and wear safety glasses.
We started off our rook manufacturing by mixing an epoxy to use as a lathing blank. To do this, we carefully mixed equal parts resin and hardener over short bursts of time as indicated on the mixing directions, and added alcohol inks for color. Then we let the mixture harden in a baking tin lined with wax paper for 5 days. A bit overkill, but this was to ensure it cured completely. Next, we set up for lathing. For safety, we wore safety glasses and no loose clothing, and tied up loose hair. We set the RPM of the belt to 2800. Then we secured the epoxy blank onto the lathe using a system of cranks and levers. Next, we turned the lathe on and gave it a spin manually so the belts would catch. Once the piece started spinning, we used rounded chisels to shape the piece into a cylinder, checking the diameter with a caliper from time to time to ensure we didn't shave it down too thin. We finished off the lathing portion by using small, pointed chisels to make the ridges in varying diameters in the piece. Finally, we finished off the piece by sawing off excess on each end of it, sanding it smooth and cleaning it up with alcohol. We made our bishops by forging. For safety, we wore a welding vest and heat protective gloves. We also kept track of the heat of the end of the aluminum bar, and since the bar acted as an infinite fin, we were able to hold it by hand. To forge, first we started a fire deep within a fire pit, and heated the aluminum until it was malleable. Then we began forging by periodically removing the aluminum bar from the fire and beating it with mallets while supporting it on an anvil. After a lengthy period of time, we were able to slim it down into a conical shape, and we began using chisels to create the ridges around it. Once we were satisfied with the shape of it, we quenched the aluminum bar in a bucket of water. Once it cooled, we sawed the bishop piece off of the end. Finally, we finished it off with some sanding here and there. We left it with a rustic look to contrast with the other finely made pieces.
We made the king and queen pieces by sand casting. To start off, we made the casting sand using a mixture of fine sand, 20 cups, bentonite clay, 2.17 cups, and water, 3/4 cup. Then we built a box to hold our molds, adding wings on the side of each to ensure the boxes stayed interlocked during the casting process. Next, we packed the casting sand into the bottom half of the mold and then pressed our 3D printed king and queen pieces halfway into the surface of the bottom mold. After that, we put the top half of the mold box onto the bottom half and added 2 straws leading down to the pieces, the sprue and the riser. Next, we filled it with sand over and around the straws and the chest pieces left indented in the bottom. Once we packed all of that sand together, we separated both mold halves and removed the negatives from within, leaving us our empty mold cavity. For casting safety, we wore fire-retarding gloves and appropriate protective clothing that we borrowed from a classmate who worked at Novelis. We melted our aluminum in a crucible and carefully poured it down our sprue, waiting to see the aluminum come up through the riser before stopping the pour, to ensure the mold had completely filled. After that, we waited for the pieces to cool, checking the surface and sides of the box with a temperature reader periodically to try and get a gauge on its temperature over time. Once the pieces cooled, we removed the top half of the mold and revealed our 2 chest pieces cast inside. We separated the pieces with a Sawzall and finished them with some light sanding and dremeling.
Behold, the battle they will never escape, for the grade they will never achieve. Who will prevail? Damn it.